This is Elaeagnus pungens, and it is a very durable evergreen shrub. These get quite large, actually. I'll look that up, but I know they get about 8 to 10 feet tall and as wide. Very drought resistant and bulletproof, and the deer tend to leave this alone as well. So if you're in need of out here, this is a green belt that they don't really want to spend a lot of time and effort on. This is typical of how I see this plant used. It's very low or no maintenance if you give it enough room for the way it behaves. So that's a good way to use these. If you're going to use them in mass the way they have here, if you're patient, certainly you can plant these 6 feet on center. These look like they're about 5 feet on center, so I think that's a good infill. These have been planted, I believe, for about 3 to 4 years, and this is the size you're seeing. Some of these are only about 4 to 5 feet tall, and this one over here is 6 feet tall by 6 feet wide. And if they're getting regular water, you would expect them to do this. These are on drip irrigation, and I don't know how much they're getting, but they're doing just fine. So what I like about the plant is its drought resistance. It's very low maintenance, and the deer usually leave it alone, so it's good for that kind of application. It's got kind of a nice arching habit also, and it's nice and dense as well. So what I don't love about it is I used to call this plant Elaeagnus. When I was in college learning plants, that was how I remembered the name, and it really stuck with me. So I apologize to anybody who really likes this plant. But I don't think it's that great looking. It has a lot of brown on it. See these brown stems? It also has, the leaves are very leathery. That's part of what makes them drought resistant. But they're just kind of dull, and the reverse on the back of the leaf looks like the leaf is dead or dying. See how brown that is? So there's Elaeagnus variegata, and I much prefer that. That said, I wouldn't use it in mass because it's bright yellow. I got a lot of yellow in it, but if I'm looking for evergreen shrubs to do this job, there's others I probably prefer, like a manzanita, and they'll do the job just as well. I just don't love the coloration. Do you see that grouping there? See how you're seeing the reverse on the back of all those leaves? And the general tonality of the grouping to me is brownish green, and I just don't find that super attractive. But if that works in what you're doing in your design, give this one a try. It's kind of one of the bulletproof plants to choose from, and it certainly does that job. That's Elaeagnus pungens. Here's Elaeagnus used as a barrier planting along this wall. I'm down lower than the wall, by the way. These plants they've filled in very nicely, and they've been pruned back, and they're pushing a lot of new growth. They're trying to keep that planting at about 3.5 feet high, and as I mentioned, these want to be a lot larger than that, so probably once to twice a year they're going to need to push these back maintenance wise. But it's not a bad looking grouping when it's all filled in, but just be aware of that brownish color that I mentioned earlier.
By the way, these have a very fragrant flower. They smell excellent, and the flower is fairly inconspicuous. You don't really see them, but you won't miss the fragrance. I noticed this smell coming from somewhere that I couldn't really see an obvious source of once, and tracked it down, and it was coming from the Elaeagnus. So these smell amazing when they're in bloom, and I believe that's in the spring. Also, these are listed to get 10 to 15 foot tall and wide, so be aware of how large they get.